Welcome to the podcast series, Ascendem, brought to you by Heidelberg University's Graduate School for Humanities and Social Sciences. Tune in for thought-provoking interviews with experts in different fields, from the social sciences to the humanities, from law to economics. Hello and welcome to the HGGS podcast series, Ascendem. Today, we are going to talk about the topic of sustainability and sustainable innovation management. Sustainability has become a prominent concept in our daily lives, as pressing environmental and social changes grow increasingly visible with each passing day. In this context, the responsibility for taking action cannot rest solely on the shoulders of a single stakeholder, namely consumers. Rather, all stakeholders, beginning with companies, must take their share in addressing these urgent environmental issues. At the same time, to ensure that sustainability does not remain merely a buzzword on paper, it is essential to develop a clear understanding of key concepts such as sustainability, sustainable innovation, and sustainable innovation management. Exploring both their theoretical foundations and practical applications through real-world examples is a crucial step toward raising awareness and supporting the wider adoption of these impactful practices. To help us navigate these complex and multifaceted concepts from both theoretical and practical perspectives, we are joined in the studio by a distinguished expert, Dr. Maximilian Jungmann, Executive Manager of the Heidelberg Center for the Environment at Heidelberg University. Welcome, Professor.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Well, first, I'd like to start with asking your academic background, and could you briefly explain us your academic background?
Sure. So I first studied political science, media, communication, and sociology in Trier, Germany, then moved to Heidelberg to do my master's in political science and sociology with an emphasis on international relations. And then I did my PhD on climate change related health risks. So how do different states in the world, how are they affected by climate change, and what do they do to adapt against these risks? And I compared how different states, what kind of adaptation measures they have, what kind of risks do they perceive, and why are some doing more, some are doing less. And during my PhD, I actually started Momentum Novum, a social enterprise focused on sustainable development. Basically, what we're doing is connecting the world of sustainability consulting with strategy consulting, where we help organizations, especially businesses, to become more sustainable and to meet all of the ESG compliance requirements. And then 2 years ago, I also started a joint venture with a large financial auditing firm, Falk Momentum, and there we're focusing on ESG compliance, reporting, and climate. And I do all of this because I'm very frustrated to see that we have so much knowledge about climate change, about sustainability challenges. We have lots of solutions also, but we're not using them in an effective and efficient way. So basically, we're not saving ourselves. And that's why my goal, my mission is to be someone who translates both worlds to each other to help increase knowledge on how we can move better into action and also help the ones that want to act to actually do that.
Actually, you have partly answered the question of what was your motivation in working these topics, but I'd like to ask maybe specifically why the topics of sustainability and sustainable innovation management were actually on the focus of your motivation or working field.
Sustainability actually goes back to my time in high school when I first watched Inconvenient Truth by Al Gore back then, when it came out, and I just couldn't understand how we as humanity are not saving ourselves if we see what's coming our way. The science is there and we're not capable of protecting us and future generations, although we know what to do and we have the solutions. And that frustrated me a lot. And I was looking for a long time what could be a career path where I can focus my energy on that, where I can have a bit more impact than usually. And there was no career that said, this is what you have to do if you want to change the world. So I was really struggling to find my right path for a long time. And during my studies, I did lots of Model United Nations. So I started in Trier back then. We went to Vancouver, to New York. Then in New York, they asked me to become part of the volunteer staff to organize the largest Model United Nations conference in the world. And then I got stuck there and I did that for more than 7 years. And I met so many inspiring people that I thought, well, there are so many great people in the world that want to make a difference. And together we can make a difference if we're strategic about it. And then from that, we started Momentum Novum both in Quito and in Heidelberg to empower all those that want to make a difference. And then over time, I learned that it's great to work with the ones that are aware, but that's not going to change the majority. And that's not going to reach a majority that we need to save our planet and save us. And therefore, I learned more about the world of strategy consulting because lots of the main decisions in organizations are prepared by big strategy consultancies like the big three, big four, and so on. And I learned that the way they analyze things and help organizations to fix problems is often very short-term oriented. So I needed to learn that to work on ways to improve it, to make it more sustainable in the environmental, the social, and the governance dimension. And at the same time, I learned that there's so much innovation every single day. And a lot of that completely contradicts the sustainability goals that we have set ourselves, because there's lots of completely unnecessary things that are being developed. There are things that harm the environment, and we sell them as the next big thing. And that's also because sustainability isn't really integrated into innovation management a lot. And that's why I said, let's work on that, because it's something that is exciting as well. If you create something new, it's much easier for people to get excited about than saying, we have to comply with this. We really have to push this through. So you have to come from both sides depending on the stakeholders you're working with.
Well, I would also totally agree with the fact that it's a really exciting topic, and also it has this interdisciplinary component actually, because you are working on the side of academia and also trying to conceptualize these terms, for example, sustainability, which we will also discover in a minute. And also you are trying to bring the perspective of the companies to this field. So that's both challenging, but also exciting, and also that creates a great impact actually. But to concretize more this term, actually, sustainability, I know that there are many definitions in the literature, and also it depends on the context. So how would you concretize this term sustainability in your research field?
Well, the most basic definition of sustainability comes from the so-called Brundtland Report, where it says that humanity has the opportunity to develop in a way that future generations have the same opportunities to use resources in a way that we have it right now. So basically, it's a super old concept going back to even the Middle Ages, where the idea was in forestry, you only take as many trees out of a forest as can regrow in a given time until you take more trees out of it again. So very simple logic. You only consume as much as is healthy for you and for the planet so that you have the same opportunity in the future. Now, these days, it's gotten much more complex because many of the sustainability challenges that we face are not visible. For example, climate change. We see the impact sometimes when there are extreme weather events, and we know due to research that climate change is contributing to that, or health risks. But to people on the street, they cannot see the root causes of climate change, although we know them now. But it's very detached from our day-to-day activities. And sustainability is much more than that. It's also the social dimension, and it has a personal dimension, because if you're, for example, fighting every day to make the world a better place in the environmental dimension, for example. You're working on solutions for clean tech, renewables, and so on. But you sacrifice yourself for it because you're so convinced and put in the energy and don't sleep and work overtime the whole time. That's also not sustainable because we know we cannot go on like that. We will burn out, and then the few people that do that will be lost for the cause. So that's not sustainable at all. And the third dimension is, how do we build organizations? Which kind of governance structures do we need? How can we have cultural sustainability in our society? And therefore, it's often called a holistic approach, where you have the environmental, the social, the economic, the cultural, the governance dimension in it as well. So that in the end, everyone profits, but also everyone can contribute to sustainable development, which is reflected in the SDGs, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations that are actually due in 2030. So in less than 4 years. And we're not on track right now, but that means that we need to work even harder to make progress towards them.
Well, I would say that related with concepts that you have brought on the table, society, environmental, and also economical aspects of the sustainability, I would say that this term sustainability, maybe it's a little bit overreaching, but it also carries an implicit connotation of need for transformation, both for the society and, as you have explained, and also companies, and also for the environment itself. So how would you elaborate on this urgency of this need for transformation actually?
Well, transformation means that we transform the way that we do things right now. That can mean how we do business. That means how we, as a society, work together. That also implies politics, so that we take the sustainability principle, thinking about future generations and us in the future, and also thinking about the global dimension, how our actions here in Germany affect the opportunities in other regions in the world to use resources, and integrating that into policy, business, and our day-to-day actions. And of course, there are lots of people that absolutely are against that because they're really interested in the status quo because they're benefiting from it. And we see that all over the world. We see it right now when we're looking at the current effects of unsustainable economics and how that hurts us economically when we're looking at the situation in the Strait of Hormuz, for example, due to the Iran war, rising energy prices, and all those that depend on fossil fuels see rising costs in every regard. That also affects our food prices, that affects our energy prices, that will affect inflation in all sorts of ways. And if we didn't have these dependencies on fossil fuels that are often connected to autocratic regimes at the same time, we would be much more resilient and better prepared for the future. But all actors that currently benefit from the use of unsustainable sources of energy and the way to keep things the way they are, they have a strong interest in keeping it, of course, because they are benefiting. So if we're speaking about transformation, we also have to speak about powers, interests, and how to make sure that enough people actually have an interest in transforming rather than opposing it.
Actually, I think based on what you have said, it's fair to say that also the key term that we are talking about here is the conflict of interests. And there are many different stakeholders when we are talking about this topic. And I'd like to concentrate on the side of the companies. And do you observe continuous progress, or are there any fluctuations, including possible setbacks in achieving actually our goals in the framework of environmental issues?
Well, transformation processes are never linear, and progress is also never completely steady. It's steady when you zoom out and you see that the curve rises in many regards. And we see some positive developments. Actually, in the European Union, greenhouse gas emissions have peaked way back. We're actually reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And we see a large rise in renewable energy production, also worldwide. Also looking at states like China, where the renewable energy production is growing exponentially. While energy demand is still growing a lot, but China is projected to actually reach their peak emissions any day now because they're investing so much in renewable energy because they know that this is connected to power in the future. If they have cheap energy and renewable energy is the cheapest source that we have, that's a huge advantage in global markets. And therefore, we see if we zoom in, there are lots of setbacks, of course. And looking at the company level, we had the so-called omnibus packages last year against the Green Deal. The Green Deal of the European Union is there to ensure that the EU will become, or Europe will become, the first climate neutral continent in the world by 2050. And last year, lots of interest groups fought against the regulation that is connected with it. And to be fair, there was a lot of bureaucracy connected to it when it comes to sustainability reporting, when it comes to deforestation, carbon trading mechanisms, due diligence requirements, and so on, product sustainability. And there was a lot of pushback, and the omnibus packages seek to reduce the bureaucratic burden. At the same time, lots of businesses misunderstood that. They thought, okay, now we don't have to do anything on sustainability anymore. Although what they actually didn't have to do primarily was to fulfill a lot of bureaucracy. That's the goal, to reduce that and to use the time and money that they saved to invest in real measures so that they're better prepared for the future. So the ones that just superficially dealt with this and say we can save this money and invest it in something else or just hold on to it, they will be in big trouble in the future. Because if you zoom out the bigger picture, globally, sustainability is gaining momentum. More and more countries worldwide are adopting sustainability reporting frameworks according to the ISSB, the International Sustainability Standards Board. And those aren't just countries in the EU or the UK or Hong Kong. Those are also states like Mexico, Canada, Nigeria, Ghana, Australia. So all over the world, most importantly, China. These requirements are rising, and they're rising because it's no longer just idealism driving it. It's very, very strategic.
I understand. And since you have also mentioned about this transboundary aspect of the environmental issues, I'd like to address one of the criticisms actually that was pointed at the EU's Green Deal, because it was criticized sometimes as being unrealistic or maybe not feasible within traditional business frameworks. And we are going to also elaborate on sustainable innovation management, but I'd like to ask, given your expertise and experience with the business sector, how would you respond to this criticism actually from the perspective of maybe innovation and global changes in understanding these environmental issues?
Well, the Green Deal by the European Union is a very ambitious framework that is connected with all sorts of instruments. And what's often criticized is the regulatory side of it, so making businesses comply. And if you don't comply, you have to fear sanctions. So for example, the one that we're all discussing right now is EMCO, the Empowering Consumers Regulation. And it comes from my perspective from a really good point, because everyone always says that consumers should choose more sustainable products, for example, when you go to the supermarket. But it's very hard to find out how sustainable it is. And there's a lot of greenwashing. And the EU said, out of the logic of protecting consumers, we need to make sure that greenwashing won't be the case anymore. So now if companies print small certificates, maybe their own logos saying sustainable or climate neutral on a product, the EU says that goes against EMCO. And if they are being sued, they will have to pay up to 4% of their annual revenue. So a big financial burden. And if you look at all of the other regulations, if businesses don't comply with any of them, they will be ruined financially. And of course, you can criticize that, because do we want to ruin businesses because of our efforts for sustainable development? Well, the counter argument to that would be, if they're not transforming now, they will be exnovated anyways, because there are so many new businesses globally rising that are designed in a more sustainable way. And the ones that desperately hold on to the past will be driven out of the market either way. And that's what we're seeing already. The ones that try to completely ignore sustainability, they are right now driven out of the market because of rising prices, because they depend so much on fossil fuels, for example. Or they don't have access to skilled workers, skilled talents anymore because no one wants to work for them. And then they lose the best minds and talents. So really, it's about smart business decisions, and the ones that just criticize the Green Deal, the regulation side of it, they are completely overseeing that it's their responsibility to do good business, and that means sustainable business these days. What can actually be criticized regarding the Green Deal is the side of fostering innovation, because what we've seen a lot is regulation. And there, I would say, from a political science perspective, regulation is necessary and sanction mechanisms are necessary. Otherwise, it's not being taken seriously. We can discuss how it's being done. It's way too bureaucratic. It's way too complicated. And it's very hard to understand. And without consultants, lots of businesses don't know how to deal with all of this regulation. But the part of the Green Deal that I would actually criticize is how the innovation side is being built up. And that's also way too complicated. We have a lot of money available, but people don't use it because they don't know how they get access to the money to invest in more sustainable business models, how to start startups. If you're thinking about having your startup in Germany, for example, it's very painful. It takes a lot of time. You need capital. You need a lot of legal knowledge, and you might have great ideas, you might have great prototypes, and you're not incorporating in Germany or other countries in the EU just because you fear the bureaucratic burden and everyone tells you that it's too risky to do it. Whereas in the US, and we can criticize almost everything about the US, but it's much, much easier to start a business and then to get capital to scale it up. And we have lots of great ideas. We have lots of great technology. We invest a lot of money in research and innovation. And then the scaling up is being done where the capital is. And that's what the EU should really focus on from my perspective.
Actually, according to my experience, when people are criticizing this concept of, in general, regulation, they are referring to bureaucracy and this ambiguity, actually, that comes with the regulation. But that shouldn't always be the case, actually, right? I mean, when we are talking about regulation, there are also effective ways, especially in the environmental sector or addressing the environmental issues, that you can create effective regulations, I guess.
Exactly. And regulation can also be the starting ground for new innovation. There are lots of companies that build their entire business models of making businesses to comply in an easier way with different regulations. The first unicorn in Germany this year was Osapiens in Mannheim. And their entire business model is based on making it easier to make your business more efficient and more sustainable. And without all of the different regulations, they would have never risen so quickly. And now they're going into the American market backed by Goldman Sachs and BlackRock. So they must be doing something right. So in the end, regulation and innovation go hand in hand. But for the innovation support side, we need capital. And if now everyone is holding on to their capital without investing in promising business models, then that will be done in other parts of the world.
Right. I think that's a great way to then delve into this concept of sustainable innovation management, because that could be also one of the solutions that we can maybe come up with when we are talking about attracting the capital. Because as we have also explained, sustainable innovation management also offers some opportunities for the companies. But first of all, maybe to clarify this concept, what distinguishes sustainable innovation from conventional innovation approaches?
So sustainable innovation means that we innovate with the framework of sustainability. And for that, if you're looking at typical innovation techniques like design thinking, for example, you first focus on the problem space. And the great thing about sustainability challenges is that there are so many of them. So that's perfect for innovation because if there are challenges, people are looking for answers. And if you're the one developing solutions for sustainability challenges, then it's very likely that there are people that are very interested in your solution. Versus when you're just innovating for comfort, there might be some that think it's a great idea, but that doesn't make it an innovation yet, because the difference between an idea and an innovation is that it reaches a certain market size and that it can be scaled up as well. And when we're looking at sustainable innovation, it's not only innovation for sustainability, but also how we can innovate in a sustainable way. So it has two parts. One is, what are you doing and who are you targeting and who are you helping? And for that, it shouldn't just be the people. It should also be the planet. It should be society as a bigger target group, as a stakeholder group instead of just the shareholders. And the other thing is, how do you actually generate value? And for generating value, you need to understand how to do business in a sustainable way so that you manage your emissions, your environmental impact, your societal impact, that you pay your workers well, that you have good working conditions, that you have anti-corruption measures, and so on. So it's about how we do business and what we do it for.
Well, moving on from the basics of this concept, innovation, maybe we can also talk about different kinds of innovation as efficiency innovation, incremental innovation, and disruptive innovation from the theory of Schumpeter. So in this context, what forms can sustainable innovation take within these categories, maybe within the different understanding of innovation?
Absolutely all of them, and I'll give you some examples. One would be efficiency innovation. That's the most common one that we see with sustainability, because we see this, for example, with energy efficiency. If you're switching from traditional light bulbs to LEDs, then that can come with much lower energy needed for the same effect or even a better effect. And that's the idea of efficiency innovation, that you have less input for the same or better output. And it's not always that easy, because with new technology, you sometimes have new LEDs that also have an integrated smart system, and they're always on standby. And then you have a rebound effect and you're actually not using less energy. And for that, we need to have the science behind it and the engineering behind it to make sure that we're actually using the technology in the right way. But efficiency innovation is often a quick win. It's much easier than other forms of innovation for sustainability. Incremental innovation would be you have slight improvements over time. So for example, when you're looking at the first iPhone, when it came out, it was disruptive because it pushed out Nokia and BlackBerry out of the market, and it disrupted the market. So with that, we also have the disruptive innovation definition already. And then over time with iPhones 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I don't know, right now we're at 17 or so, or 18 even, we see incremental innovation. And incremental innovation for sustainability can, for example, mean that we have a product already that is working in a certain way, and we're slightly improving it to reduce the negative effect that it has on the environment. So incremental innovation would be, for example, for combustion engines, that they've become more efficient. So you also have an efficiency innovation, and it's incrementally improved to use less fossil fuels. And the disruptive innovation would be electric cars then, that push out the combustion engines out of the market altogether. So disruptive means that you're trying to disrupt the market in a way that the existing business models don't stand a chance anymore. So it often leads to exnovation, the death of old technologies.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I have to confess that whenever we are also talking about this example of iPhone is dominating the market and leaving out the Nokia, that has this connotation of releasing the information of our age, actually, because some young generation cannot really remember Nokia and BlackBerry were also dominating the market. But yeah, thank you so much for giving this example too.
So maybe not the best for Gen Z.
Yeah, totally. And also, I'd like to also talk about this sustainable business models because based on what you have explained and also clarification of this concept innovation, there is this term, this new term actually that is more heard in the public sustainable business models. So how is sustainability integrated into the broader process of business model development?
Well, for business model development, we have to understand different questions that you have to ask yourself when you're doing business. And typically in innovation processes, people use the business model canvas, for example. And for that, they ask themselves, how do you generate profit in the end? And when you're challenging that from a sustainability perspective, then you could say it's not just about how to generate profit, but equally important is how do you create impact with what you're doing, and impact for whom? So that we're not innovating something that is just there to create profit for a few, for the shareholders, but that it's also beneficial for the broader society and also for silent stakeholders like the environment. The environment doesn't have a seat on the table, but it's a crucial stakeholder, and it will have us feel their power if we don't listen to it because of extreme weather events, for example. So one part is to think about impact while we're also thinking about profit. It doesn't mean that sustainable businesses don't do any profit. There's a huge spectrum from non-profit to for-profit. And in between, we have social entrepreneurship or social businesses, a concept that was very much driven forward by Muhammad Yunus and the Grameen Foundation, the Grameen Bank. And there are some social enterprises that are for profit, some that give certain parts of their profit automatically to charities, that they have their own foundation, and some of them are completely not for profit. There are associations, for example, that use business models for impact first. So when you're thinking about your business model, you should always ask yourself, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? How am I doing it? And connect it with sustainability and think about impact for the society and the planet with what you do and impact on that through what you do. So the way you do business.
Mhm. And you have mentioned one side of this concept, actually, that not every company should be built on this concept of profit maximization. That's the first one. But even a company is also built on this concept, profit generating. There could be also some competitive advantages for the companies in the practical sense. So can sustainable business models also provide some competitive advantages for companies, or if yes, then what are these advantages?
Yeah, even if you're completely for profit, we see that sustainable businesses are in general often much more profitable than non-sustainable ones because of the underlying sustainability principles. And those principles are resilience, consistency, sufficiency, and efficiency. Resilience means that your business is less dependent on external shocks, like oil crises, for example, and you can continue your business in tough times. Then sufficiency means that you're consuming as a business only what you really need to do. So very often businesses have unnecessary expenses that they don't need to have, and that reduces the profit that they're making. Then consistency means that they're creating less waste. So the principle of circular economy. And this is often connected to waste in terms of financial losses as well. If you have a business model that's very wasteful, that's not very profitable. And efficiency means that you're using more resources and energy than you would have to use if you're trying to get the same output. So if you increase your efficiency, that also means that you can save money. That's the quick win that we discussed earlier, something that businesses often do when money is tight. They try to become more efficient, and that can lead to more sustainability as well. Can, but doesn't have to, because you can also have other ways to improve your profit than sustainability principles. And that's why we really have to analyze it that way.
Right, that's always the case actually. But offering this concept, sustainability, into this profit-making process would also help actually in terms of understanding the ways that the business model works. But another concept that is really important here is that sufficiency-driven business models, which is really exciting because within this framework of this concept, firms encourage customers not to overconsume even their own products. So, do you see these approaches as promising and effective?
There are examples where it is effective, the most prominent being Patagonia, where they mentioned that during Black Friday, for example, the day that most businesses try to sell as much as possible, they closed their online shop and said, don't buy this jacket, because they said, really think about whether you need a new jacket. And we see that Patagonia benefited from this campaign a lot because it improved their reputation and credibility. And people said, okay, I'll buy a Patagonia jacket because that's going to be the last one I will ever buy. And over time, I will save a lot of money because they help me repair it. They will replace it if it breaks. They will give me a discount if I don't want it to be repaired, and so on. So they said, if I buy from anyone, I'll buy from them. And the hook that they had was actually sufficiency, something that most businesses try to avoid because they just want to sell as much as possible. And Patagonia wants also, of course, to sell as much as possible, but they don't want people to consume more. They just want people to consume their products and not the ones of others. And it's working.
That's really good news to hear that. So that's also proves that these kind of business models are also working. And I'd like to, at the end of our formal part, informative part, two challenges that also companies face with. And the first one is that you also have emphasized this problem that companies initiate transformation processes toward sustainable business models, but these efforts remain limited to statements on paper or like just workshops, just buzzwords in the workshops. So what are the key factors for companies seeking to make their operations more sustainable?
I would say the key factor is culture. And
not an easy solution.
And culture builds over time, but we see that culture can also change very quickly for the good and for the worse. For the worse, if you have toxic people and they spoil the atmosphere for others and others don't put in the effort anymore. So in order to make sure that toxicity cannot spread in an organization, it's really important to have good structures, processes, and strategies and policies to deal with that so that people see where barriers are. And you need good leaders to reinforce that and to also select people and promote people that are contributing to a good culture. So in the end, a lot depends on the top-down management. And we see that wherever businesses are sustainably successful, they have really good top management that is not just short-term oriented. And in Germany, for example, we have lots of family businesses. And with family businesses, you can see that they're not just thinking about the next 5 financial years. They're thinking about in what state are we giving our business to the next generation, to their kids usually. And with big corporations, it's often how well do I perform in the time that I'm on the board? And how can I maximize profit in that time? And then the next person will have to deal with the consequences. And then they try to do the same. So they squeeze more out of it as they get. They might get more efficient, but they neglect the other sustainability principles. And on the long term, that means that they will crash into a wall because they haven't invested, they haven't innovated, they haven't discovered what their competitors are doing. And then they will be driven out of the market. So what we really need to do is a shift in the mindsets of the top management and of everyone in the organization, and that's culture.
Well, it's a really challenging way to improve things, but we have to maybe also accept the fact that that's the only way to achieve a sustainable solution in terms of addressing these problems. And one of the key actors actually in the market that are playing a prominent role in addressing these issues are the sustainable startups actually. And they are also facing with a lot of problems since they are startups, they are new in the business, and also they are trying to integrate with this new innovative concept. So how would you elaborate on sustainable startups, and first of all, why are they important in addressing these problems in the market, and what kind of challenges that they face when competing with the incumbent firms?
Sustainable startups are extremely important because they are often looking for disruptive innovation, and they can move much faster and in a much more agile way than traditional businesses because they are big and slow. Once they move, they can be very powerful, but it takes a long time until they move. And the startups can gain a lot of momentum because they can maneuver much more quickly. And to then grow and gain power, they need capital. And that's one of the biggest challenges that they face, is that once they hit relevance, they are either bought by bigger companies, which doesn't have to be bad because then they have contributed to change. The question is what happens to them after they have been bought. And if they want to scale up, they will need capital. And with that, often their priorities change. Because if you're just giving them capital to maximize profit, it's very hard to keep disrupting for sustainability because sustainable businesses have other priorities as well. It's not just squeezing out 10, 15, 20% of profit a year, but it's at the same time equally important enhancing impact. There are some sustainable business models that might be extremely profitable, for example, in the energy sector. But there are others that might be profitable, but not as profitable as existing ones, but they might be extremely impactful. So the question is, do we lend capital, do we invest only in the most profitable ones, or in the most impactful ones, or in a good mix of the two? So everyone investing should ask themselves, what do we really want, and what is worth what? And we see that there are more and more impact investors that want to invest their money in a sustainable way. And actually everyone can. Even if you just have a few €100 to invest, you can go to an energy cooperative and invest your money in renewable energy, and you get 3 to 4% every year, which is much better than what you get at your regular bank. But if you just want to improve your financial portfolio, you'd probably go for ETFs. And you can get up to 8%. But with your ETFs, your impact will be very limited because it's very mixed investment. And with your investment in the energy cooperatives, you will have the biggest impact that you can have, and you still get 4%. So even as an individual, you can ask yourself, what do I want? Do I want impact first? Do I want profit first? Do I want to have a mix of it? And now you can think about the big decisions of investors globally that have the same question that they ask themselves, but just on a very different scale.
Well, Professor Jungmann, thank you so much for this really insightful interview, and also finding time for us to share your insights with us, with our listeners. And at the end of our podcast episode, traditionally we ask some questions about your personal reflections actually. And I would like to ask, first of all, you have attended International Climate Change Conference, which I guess was a really special occasion, and also for you to have experience about the international aspects of these issues. So did participating in such an international event give you greater hope for the future in addressing environmental challenges?
Yes and no. We see that the international development is, of course, dependent on lots of different factors. And in some regards, it has been extremely frustrating. For example, when we look at the role of states that have been very impactful, for example, in Northern America, that have new governments that completely work against climate change and international cooperation, not just in that field, but in any field. But we see that other states are stepping up. And China is the primary example. They're investing so much in climate action because of business reasons. And they see that it's a huge opportunity for them to do business with the rest of the world and to have a competitive advantage. So when we're looking at the national level, we see huge changes in the global landscape of who's at the forefront of climate action and who's losing also financially. When we look at cooperation, we see that the COPs are still there. This year it will take place in Antalya in Turkey, hopefully, depending also on the situation in the Middle East, of course, but until now it's been planned. And the forum is still there. The instruments are in place. We have much better ways to monitor progress and setbacks when it comes to efforts for climate action through the nationally determined contributions and the global stock take to monitor that. So we have much more knowledge on where we are. We are definitely not on track, but international cooperation is still there. And that's really important also to maintain peace and security. Because imagine we'd be living in an even more challenging world if there was no cooperation on climate action, because then some states might have strong interests in climate engineering, for example, and others might feel the negative effects of climate change even further. So cooperation is essential. But we need different forms of cooperation to really move faster and more effectively on climate action. That could be climate clubs, that could be coalitions of the willing, that could be corporations between the public and private sector. There are so many ways to accelerate it, but the key question is who wants to push for it and who wants to avoid it. And this is also where the German government, quite frankly, has to step up and ask themselves, are they holding on to the past or are they setting the foundation for a prosperous future?
Those are also really significant policy recommendations from your side, and thanks for sharing them. And as a last question, I'd like to ask, you also serve as an executive manager of the Heidelberg Center for the Environment. So would you like to share your upcoming academic plans as well as center's current and future activities?
Thank you so much. Yes, the Heidelberg Center for the Environment here at Heidelberg University seeks to foster collaboration for inter and transdisciplinary research. So we have people working in physics, geography, earth sciences, up to psychology, economics, political science, and the humanities. Pretty much every subject is represented. And we address research questions that we cannot answer from one single perspective. And through that, we seek to start new and more risky research projects on climate, on water, on biodiversity, and so on. So anyone who's interested in that, please join us. We also have programs for PhDs, such as the HCE College and Collegio Futuro, that you also participated in very successfully, where we connect you with our colleagues and other European universities, such as Copenhagen, Paris, Prague, and so on. And we seek to foster collaboration to enhance the way that we do research, to have more opportunities to do impactful research, and to strengthen collaboration for sustainable development. And you're all invited to join our events, to join the HCE, so that we can work together to contribute to better research for a better planet.
Actually, as a student who has attended many of the activities of the Heidelberg Center for the Environment, I would totally recommend you to check out their website regularly. And we will also share the link of the website below in the description part of the episode. So you can also keep up to date with the activities of the Heidelberg Center for the Environment. So thank you so much again, Professor Jungmann. And we are closing our episode right now. If you liked our episode, please don't forget to check our latest episodes. And Professor Jungmann and I are saying goodbye to you.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye. Thank you for listening to the HGGS podcast series, Ascendem. In this series, we bring you conversations with experts from a wide range of disciplines, from the social sciences to the humanities, from law to economics. If you enjoyed our podcast, we invite you to explore our previous episodes and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a new episode. Stay tuned for more insightful interviews coming soon.